Hello and welcome to this overview of the innovative instrument, the Soma pipe. In this video today, I'll be doing a variety of things. I'll give you an introduction to what this instrument is. I'll take you through some of its features, show you some of its sounds. I'll do an unboxing video, and I'll try to talk about how this particular device might be used in some of your sonic experiments. So first off, if you're familiar with the company Soma, you know that they are based in Moscow and started by an individual named Vlad Kramer. And he produces some of the most innovative musical sound devices and instruments out there. If you're familiar with the pipe, you probably already know about the Lyra 8, and it's one of the heaviest instruments I have ever owned. The Lyra 8 it's hard to describe. It's called an organismic synthesizer, and it creates these incredible drones and sound palettes that if you haven't heard it, check out one of my videos on YouTube or one of the other great ones out there and really get a sense of what this instrument is about. And I'm suggesting this because if you look at what this does sonically in terms of its timbre, in terms of its approach to sound making, noise making, and so forth, you have a pretty good sense of the territory that you're getting into in terms of the pipe. Now, when I first heard about the pipe, I was actually thinking as a wind player, as a saxophonist, recorder player, that it was going to be a wind synth in a sense, like my Yamaha WX5. It actually isn't that, and I think that's a good thing. So the WX5, if you know this, essentially is a wind synthesizer. It has a fingering in keys that can be mapped to, say, recorder fingering or saxophone fingering. It has a MIDI out, and it also has a tone generator, the VL70, that is used in conjunction with this. It has sensitivity because of a mouthpiece, a reed, also a ability to use your voice to modulate the sound. You can route that modulation to MIDI, control signal changes, and so forth. And so it's a very versatile instrument, certainly, as a wind instrument goes. And for me, in terms of the music I create, having something like the WX5 is very useful because it allows me to create some things sonically that I think are different just because of the control systems involving the wind side of it, the embouchure, the blowing, the ability even to growl and to create some interesting modulation effects. So it's for me a very important piece in my sonic approaches to creating musical and sound compositions. Now, another instrument I've recently begun to experiment with, and I'm giving you this as context for what the pipe is, I think, about. This is just a traditional, this is a tenor recorder, and I've been experimenting recently. Years ago I played the recorder, and so I specifically thought I would use this in conjunction with some of my effects pedals and other devices, including my Euro rack and some of the effects modules there. Perhaps even use this to control some of my Euro rack using an envelope follower, routing it through the system and creating a unique timbre in terms of what you would not normally expect from, say, a recorder. Well, I mentioned these two instruments, and really, if you're thinking that this is a wind synth in a traditional sense or a wind instrument like a recorder that can be patched through devices, I think it's really the wrong way to approach and understand what this instrument is. Now, indeed, it does have what you could say is a wind component, and I will in a little bit be playing this for you and also have the oscilloscope going so you can see exactly what this is doing. It has a series of algorithms which are all listed on the back of the instrument, and it as I said earlier, it has a almost like a mouthpiece, but it's really a microphone, a modified piezo that actually can be removed. And the reason for this is you can purchase more than one of these microphones that allow you different timbres, different sonic registers to control the synth with. Also, and we'll probably get this later, I can plug in another microphone. I could plug in a line signal, an instrument signal from any of my devices, so I could take any oscillator from my Eurorack setup and immediately plug into here and use the onboard controls, the algorithm control, the level, the three controls here, and the one switch that acts as a alternative secondary button to initiate new functions. I can then have that just by simply plugging something into here. So in a sense, you could get away using this without even using the microphone. But for me, it's the microphone that does make it an interesting instrument. Now, as I said earlier, I don't think it's what I would call a wind synthesizer. And in fact, when you get into Soma and what they do sonically, it's really hard to describe this. And I advise you, I'll put up on the screen here, to really look at the Soma website. There's so much that Vlad has there in terms of his approach to sonic design, his approaches as a performer. There's an element of like mysticism that comes into play when you start interacting with these instruments. And also on the screen here is their philosophy to making instruments. And I think their philosophy to instruments indicates to me that this device is for a certain type of person. It's not going to be for everybody. If you played in, I don't know, an electronic jazz fusion band, if there is such a thing, this probably would not come in handy. It's very experimental. If I were going to talk about a continuum, on one end being, say, traditional VSTs or workstations, and on the other end, experimental instruments, this would be at the extreme end of experimental instruments. I mean, it's absolutely new and innovative and defies logic when you think about what it does. As you hear some of these sounds later, you'll maybe come to appreciate that. But to go back to my earlier point, it really is not a traditional wind synth, but you are controlling it through your pressure that you place on the mouthpiece here, which you could call the mouthpiece, and of course what you're blowing into it. But really what you're doing is singing tones. You could be singing tones of a variety of sorts and pitches. That is what gets translated through the electronics in this instrument into sounds. And the sounds, by the way, there's a modified XLR cable, it's not a traditional one, that goes into this box. And this particular box then has two outputs, basically, a power input, and that's about it. So this is the box that translates or takes this information and I guess translates it into sonic information that you can put in your mixer, into your speakers, whatever you want to do with that. So that's how the sound comes out of here. Now, one thing I would note about this is, just judging from what's printed on the back of this and judging from the very little I know about the electronics, probably is not the case that there'll be firmware updates for this. A lot of my Eurorack modules here, Clouds is one of them, which if you know about Clouds, it's a pretty famous Eurorack effects module. I can actually not just update that with new firmware if it comes out by the company and Clouds is discontinued, but people who've created through open source platforms online new firmware, you can upload that. And that's one thing that I guess isn't going to happen, because I'm assuming if this is printed on here, these are your algorithms for the life of the instrument. Now, who knows? I saw that Vlad was working on a MIDI input or some MIDI device that would allow MIDI operations from the instrument I showed you, the drone synth, the Lyra 8. So who knows? I don't want to speak too soon because the wizards at Soma may come up with something interesting. They're working on a new drum machine, the Pulsar 23, that looks to be absolutely, again, mind-blowing like these two instruments I'm featuring today. They also have a Eurorack unit, which I don't have. It's basically an effects processor that you plug into your modular system that has some of the same blocks of the Lyra 8. So the delay block, the distortion, I believe, as well. Maybe there's a filter on there, I'm not entirely sure. But coming back to the pipe, as I said earlier, extremely experimental, not really what I would call a wind synth or a wind instrument, but it uses your singing into the instrument. It reminds me more of, the throat singing or something like that, where people are doing polyphonic singing, chanting, something of that nature. Even Gregorian chanting or singing, I think, is reminiscent of this when you start to hear some of the sounds. Now, as usual with Soma, they've designed an instrument that it reminds me really of like cubism. It has like a cubist look to it. I actually think there's maybe a Picasso that has instruments, I don't know, like this, but there's a guitar that's coming to mind. So it almost looks cubist in nature. It has the really cool light on here, so it lights up on the front. And it has, just to overview, give you a little more on the setup here. If you wanted to, there's a screw here, so you could actually, or actually it's down here, a screw that would allow you to put it, say, on a microphone stand if you wanted to do that. It would allow you to have it stationary where you could as a performer at an event, come back to it, you could route it through your effects, and you'd still have access to the three main knobs here, and then also the secondary button as well. Vlad notes that in his design behind this, he used very high-level components. So this is a touch switch, not unlike the Lyra 8, which should give you more life in terms of longevity of the unit. If it's something you have to push up and down over time, of course that wears out. So they've really thought about the design. Anything you buy from Soma is so well constructed, it's almost scary. There's nothing plastic about it. There's nothing that looks mass-produced, even though I know they've opened up a second plant, I believe, in Europe to increase the production because the demand has been so high. Recently, I saw Perfect Circuit in December 2018. They did start carrying these. I know Noisebug and Pomona has them, and they're somewhat hard to find. This one I actually got through the website from Moscow. It takes a little bit of time for it to ship, and you have to pay for it using an online payment system. But again, once you get the instrument, it's just absolutely amazing in terms of what it can do. So there's a place on the back where you could hold the instrument. There is also a spot here if you wanted to screw in a neck strap. You could also do that. It's not really heavy. I don't know if that would be worthwhile doing that. On the front, as I said, there's another, so essentially you're buttressed. The instrument has these plates on both sides. They're just ergonomically to hold the instrument. And then there is the engage button here. If you don't have your finger on that bottom button, the instrument will not play. Once you have that engaged, you can manipulate any of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 knobs on the side of the instrument, and if you engage this top one, as we'll hear in the sound demo, it actually then will give you a secondary function. And I will say anything Soma does, their manuals are absolutely massive, and they're full of not just practical information about the instrument, but they're also full of like philosophical ruminations. As I mentioned earlier with mysticism, there's a lot of attention given to the sonic possibilities of this instrument, particularly as they might be used, this and the other instruments might be used in experimental sound performances. To round out the controls then on the front, these are your choice of algorithms. And I love these switches, by the way. They're just so solid and futuristic looking. The whole instrument looks just so futuristic and fascinating. This is your level control, and this is 1, 2, and 3 in terms of your functions, and those functions are listed here. So, for example, for the Orpheus, this lists the sensor function, which is here, and then the 3 knobs, so 1, 2, and 3. And so for the Orpheus, say algorithm, the secondary button here will engage distortion. The first knob, the size of the first resonator, size of the second resonator, the second knob. Third knob is decay time. And again, I'll take you through all those sounds in a little bit to give you a sense of what this sounds like sonically. And I would say, and I'll feature on here a short clip, and this short clip shows you trying to use this instrument in a sonic composition. And I have to say, not unlike the Lyra 8, on initial run through, when you first start using something like this, you might be baffled, if not frustrated. And I think, traditionally that would be a bad thing. I think in this case, it's a good thing, because again, it's getting you into sonic experimentation with an instrument unlike any other out there. There is really no equivalent to this. So for me, the frustration, the challenge of working with this sonically to try to make it stand out, make sense in the mix, as I'll show you in my sample track I've been working on, is part of the fun of using this instrument. I think the philosophy behind Soma is that you'll never get bored with the instrument. There's nothing like it out there. So as a result of that, that initial frustration of using it is probably part of that mystery, the creative process of trying to design something interesting with the sound of the particular instrument. Now let me also then take you on just an unboxing video I shot when I received the pipe, so that you have a better sense of what you get in the package and what you might expect if you order one of these. All right, as we do the unboxing of the Soma pipe today, I thought I would play as the soundtrack accompanying my narration some of the sounds from the pipe. So you can see it's pretty well packaged, and again, you might just inquire into options for purchase. There are a lot of options out there depending on if you're in Europe, depending on if you're in the States. Retailers often have the instruments. You can order directly from Soma. The issue that might come up is just the method of payment in terms of electronic payment, and then VATs or any import charges that you might incur, and this all depends on where you live, of course. So it's just something you could check out if you're interested in purchasing one. And I think the relative scarcity of Soma gear adds to its sense of allure. It adds to its appeal because they're not mass produced, and there's something very boutique about these instruments, as you see with other manufacturers out there that also make experimental electronic musical gear. So we can look a little bit here at the box itself, and one of the things that is pretty cool about Soma, if you purchase a lyra or if you purchase a pipe, is that you get a really nice box that is super strong and sturdy, and you can see the packing on the inside. And there also is a pretty cool magnetic clip that I'll demonstrate right now. So it's not your cheap box, and it's one of the things that you almost don't need to purchase like a special case or something for your instrument. You certainly could. I ended up buying one of the deck savers for my Lyra 8. For the Soma pipe, the only thing that I would suggest is that if you're taking it along, you might want to take it in that box that it comes with, because it's just so sturdy. It allows you to protect the items on the inside, particularly that modified XLR cable that has uniqueness about it. If you have to purchase another one, you'd have to presumably purchase it directly from Soma, because it's not a traditional XLR type cable. Okay, and getting into what you might expect to get if you order a pipe. As you see here, you get basically 4 items. So you get the actual pipe unit itself, you get the connector cable that takes it to the breakout box, which features your audio output and also powers the instrument, and it's comes also with the power adapter for it. So those are the 4 items that you get. You can see, as I've talked about throughout this video, everything is so well made. There are pads on the bottom of the breakout box that protect your table or whatever, and then the pipe itself is so super sturdy. Having something that is metal, the switches, the knobs are metal, all the plates are metal. It really is such a solid device, and I think it's one of the best things about what Soma produces, is that everything has such high quality to it. I've featured already in the video some discussion of the algorithms, and what I'll do in a second is actually take you through all of those algorithms, show you the sounds. I'm pointing there to the secondary sensor button, which is there. The top one, the bottom one again, is what makes the initial contact with the instrument, allowing the sound to be produced. And those handles again are really what create, I guess you'd call it, the ergonomics of the instrument. It allows you to hold it. You could, as I've mentioned in this video, purchase a neck strap. I don't see the need for that personally, but it is a matter of personal preference. I think it's light enough that it doesn't have a heaviness to it when you play it as an instrument. It fits easily, I would say, in one hand, and then you'll want to use your other hand to control the algorithms, control the 3 levers or the knobs, the output level, and then you use your primary hand. Presumably it would be your left hand. I don't think you could hold it with your right hand and do it that way, but this is not an instrument that requires dexterity as far as if you're left-handed in terms of using it. And I'll just show you here a little bit more of how you might hold the instrument, and again you're getting a close-up of the 2 sensors there on the instrument. I think it is really an easy instrument to use, just in terms of its dynamics of holding it and working with it. The thing that is challenging, as I've mentioned throughout this video, is just getting a sense of each of the algorithms and how they might best be deployed by you, the performer. Again, there's a lot you could do with the mouthpiece. I mentioned earlier that you could actually plug in an external source, so you can use this as a full effects processor, which I think does a little bit of double duty. And the effects here or unlike most multi-effects pedals you might get out there. There are some new ones certainly in the market, some boutique pedals like those of Infinite Jets come to mind that have a similar experimental approach in terms of creating something entirely different. But having this double opportunity as a performance wind type instrument and as an effects unit, I think really allows you to justify the purchase. Now, as I mentioned earlier, trying to make that comparison with, say, a WX5 and is it a wind synth? It's not. I would say ideally I wouldn't consider it a wind synth, but it's an experimental synthesizer that uses your voice as a primary means of control. So a little bit of clarification there as we round out the unboxing of the pipe today. And I thought right now I would feature some of that demo track with you. Again, this was an attempt to try to create a first mix, a sonic design that used the pipe as one of the primary instruments of 4 instruments on the particular track I was creating. So I thought now we might jump into some sound experimentations. I'll change the camera angle here and I'll show you the oscilloscope so you can see exactly what each of the algorithms is. Okay, so we'll start with the sonic overview. of the various algorithms. Again, to access the algorithms, you simply turn this dial here, and you'll get the various algorithms. And most of these have, some of them are more like synthesizer sounds. When you get into the percussive here, those are, I would say, almost like for beatboxing, the bass drum variations. And then the ones here past the octava, these last two with the nuclear sign, they have the most experimental character to them. So the first one here is called Orpheus, and this uses essentially two resonators, and you could actually tune these separately. I was reading that it might be ideal to have the decay around 70% and these around 30%, and we'll just take a try with this. And again, with an instrument this experimental, you know, it really does require you to spend some time with it and to look into how you might produce sound. So here's a first attempt at the Orpheus algorithm. And as you watch the video, just make sure, I'll always have this button depressed to get the sound. The top button is the secondary or the sensor button listed here. So in this case, it'll produce a distortion effect. So you'll maybe note that as I play. Again, I'm going to sing through the microphone. And I can actually continue to adjust the effect of the resonators like that, which is very cool. I have to say, this is very expressive. Think of with a traditional wind synth like the WX5, you could never do that, right? The minute you stop playing the note, unless you have a very long decay or sustain, the sound stops. So I really love that about this instrument. We'll add the secondary button here. Release the secondary button. And you hear that decay continue as I max the decay out. I could still change those two resonators. And you could see the waveform on our screen here. And it's still ringing. I think we'll do that maybe infinitely. Now, one thing that might be interesting with any of your algorithms to try out, and this is recommended in the manual, is you don't necessarily have to directly put your lips on the sensor. We could just blow into it. So let's try that and see what sound, how the sound is different in that sense. So you kind of note there, and let me also depress the secondary sensor button. As it gets closer to the mouthpiece here, the sound will change, so you can experiment with that as well. You can see it really does require, I think, a good deal of control, and the unpredictability of this instrument as compared to, say, an equal temperament instrument, a saxophone, a wind synth, is that it really requires you to think about control systems in a much different sense than you would with any other instrument. So the next algorithm is Filtera. It's found here, and this combines a dynamic resonant filter with a reverb. And again, it's very handy. I don't have these memorized to see what each thing does. So the first knob will control the frequency, the second one is the resonance, the third is the time of the reverb, and then the sensor will create a freeze effect. So we'll do the sensor last. And I'm not going to read the required or the recommended tips on this one. I did on some of the on the last one, but it's another good opportunity to check out that manual because it is so detailed and has so much information for you. So we'll just randomly set some of these and see what we get with this next algorithm. So you probably heard right there, I'm changing the frequency, even though my voice is still singing a different frequency. So with this instrument, because you're singing and because of what this does electronically, you can get some very interesting polyphonic effects. For most of us who can't do throat singing, this might be the closest we'll get to polyphonic singing of a sort. Let's look at it some more here. Again, you can continue to use those controls. The minute I take my finger off, it should start to decay. You can see a couple times there I actually overblew it, and that's one of the things about the instrument is that, particularly as you get into some of these later nuclear kind of algorithms, it's very easy to distort your mix, and so sometimes you have to go back and just retune things with the instrument. Let's try the freeze function now with the Filtera algorithm. So as you can see, in the waveform there, it's freezing what I had intoned in the microphone. When I release that, it should start to decay. So it's another cool algorithm here with the pipe. Now the next one, as you might gather from the icon, is a synthesizer type effect. Again, we'll look at our panel here, and you can see it features the sensor will function as an octave harmonizer. In a lot of cases these correlate, so on quite a few of these reverb time is always going to be 3, which has the 3 dots. And so we'll remember that's reverb time. The reverb mix is the first button or first knob, and then the low pass filter setting, presumably I think that's the frequency, is going to be the second. So let's try this one out. First without the sensor button. And I'm just noticing, because again I'm learning this instrument maybe like you are, I change my lip, what would be in a saxophone the embouchure. So the embouchure in wind instruments and many wind instruments refers to the tightness of your lips such that you're creating a tighter or looser passage of air into your mouthpiece, whether that's a flute opening, a recorder opening, or in a saxophone or a reed instrument. So I think you'll hear that a little bit. If I just change the tightness of my lips and the pressure, the sound will alter as well, as they suggest in the manual. We'll try the secondary sensor. I have to say, it's one of these things, recording it for you, it's kind of hard because as I'm singing, I'm hearing the pitch in my head, and I do have headphones on, but it's hard for me to hear what's coming out of the mix. So it's one of the challenging things about recording this instrument that's a little bit different than, say, using my WX5. WX5, when I'm playing it, I'm really not singing into it, except if I'm doing a growl or something like that. Now, they recommended on this algorithm, the synth one, that we can try percussive sounds as well. So let's do that, or some noise sounds of some sort. Okay, that's actually pretty cool. That's a really cool effect. And one of the things I would say about the pipe is that you can do the long, sustained, ethereal soundscape type things like a Robert Fripp, sound landscape on a guitar. Or you could do these other percussive things, as you'll see with some of the later algorithms that are more really about beatboxing. Okay, the next one to look at is what they say is the easiest to understand. That's the reverb algorithm. And as we've done in the past, let's take a look at what is involved here. So the secondary sensor button will hook us into a distortion delay, which is really cool. It's one of the things I think of when I think of the Lyra 8 or the Eurorack unit. It's just a great signature sound. As usual, the third knob is reverb time. The reverb mix is 1, which is the same as our previous algorithm. And then the delay feedback will be the secondary knob. So we'll experiment a little bit with this sound, reverb. Again, just listen to the resonance there. As we let that drift off, you see the waveform. It's just a beautiful, beautiful sound. And from a perspective of playing, as a wind instrumentalist, I have to say this is just so different than playing a traditional wind synth. It's just so phenomenal in terms of experimenting with it. Now, the next of these is called M-A-D-E-L-A-Y. So I assume that's a portmanteau word of mad and delay, because what this delay does is it actually jumps from one part of the delay to the other and incorporates a series of interesting tempo sync effects. The secondary button will be our freeze. The tempo in this algorithm is knob 1, freeze time is knob 2, delay feedback is knob 3. Very interesting effects, if you can hear that, almost like an arpeggiation style. Let's try the secondary sensor button. If that doesn't excite you about the pipe, then the pipe's probably not for you, because that to me is just phenomenal with what's going on there, the waveform, the sonic implementation. Let's try a little more with this button depressed. I think I'll try tapping it this time. Just listen to that algorithm. So that essentially is creating a glitch effect, and it's one of the things they suggest you can try in the manual. And lastly, they suggested we try words and percussive effects. So let's try words first. I'm not sure what that'll sound like. So I was singing 1 and 2 into the microphone, if you could tell. And let's just try some drum effects as well, or drum sounds. That might be one of my favorite algorithms. I think it's just phenomenal in terms of what it does with your sound. Okay, the next algorithm is called pulse. And this really does get into more, almost like an arpeggiation, as I started to talk about with the previous algorithms. So the pulse secondary button will be a restart, restarting the cycle. The first one is the tempo on the knobs, decay is the second knob, reverb time is the third. So let's give this one a shot. And I think we'll try singing first notes into it, and then we'll experiment with some percussive rhythmic sounds to see how those sound as well. A little hard to work with. This one I'd have to practice, particularly that restart secondary button to create something interesting. And in the manual they suggest you could use that to sync your sound with a band to restart your cycle. So a lot to practice on that one. Let's try some percussive sounds into it as well. So yeah, that one I think is my least, I feel least accomplished with that particular algorithm, so it's one I could potentially practice to learn in the future. Okay, the next three algorithms are all percussion ones. So the first one we'll try is bass drum, and the second is bass drum, which is switchable using the sensor, so it will alter the pitch, the sound character. And the next one is snare. If the sensor is depressed, you hear a snare. If you don't, you hear the bass drum. So we'll try first our first bass drum one. And I'm not a beatboxer, so you'll be able to tell that quite quickly here. In any case, most of these, the tune is, so the tune will be A, or not A, knob 1, pitch is knob 2, decay knob 3, and in this case distortion will come in on the sensor since we're not triggering like in the next true a different sound. So we'll wait on that second use of the sensor. That's pretty cool, actually. So they describe it as a 909 inspired bass drum. Doesn't sound like a 909 that I've heard of, because you're just controlling so much with your knobs, and also, you know, what you're doing in terms of your mouth and the percussive sounds you're creating there. And it was really cool how you could sweep the pitch and hear that change, and then ramping up that decay creates an additional effect. Again, that distortion, that secondary button, totally changes the sonic character of what you're working with. So let's try the second bass drum. This, when I press the secondary sensor, you'll hear a different sound to that bass drum. So let's try this one out now. I feel like this one really allows you to experiment with your wind, the lip pressure, the distance between your mouth and the air blowing in this way versus actually touching the microphone. So that one's pretty cool. When you hit that sensor button, to me it reminds me of like one of those classic electronic tom sounds. It has a higher pitch to it. So very cool. And last we'll try our algorithm that includes the snare drum. Again, note when I press and not press, depress and don't have it depressed, the secondary button, what happens. So you hear the snare drum is the default. In this case, it changes a little bit. There's a decay, which is, so the first one is tune, the second knob is decay of the snare drum, third is decay, and then the bass drum trigger is this button here. And then what I'll do is I'll vary this depressed or not, and that way you could create a paraphonic sequence. So it's similar to a Eurorack module like Planck as an example that allows you to trigger two pitches, and each trigger is a new sound, and that's essentially what we're doing here, not unlike a Eurorack module, or I guess you could say a drum machine. And I'm glad they did the snare drum as default, because it would be a little uncanny or strange to me if, you know, it just makes sense. If you're doing your bass drum, that's how you trigger it. So bump, bump, bump. It just makes sense performing it that way. So I'm glad they created that as opposed to the reverse in terms of that sensor. Okay, the next algorithm to check out, we have 3 left, is the octaver. It's a bass clef there, as you can see. And this one combines a traditional harmonizer, an octave pedal, say, that you might have. I remember in the old days singing through octave pedals and getting those weird effects, and it usually sounded either like the Chipmunks or some, you know, Hades demon when you would do minus 24 in terms of pitch or plus 24 or whatever. And so this will be an octaver combined with a delay and also a filter. And to look on the back, you see the secondary switch is, looks like it's a plus, is it negative 12 or minus 12? We have to see. And then the down up is knob A, high pass filter, I think, is the second knob, and then feedback is the third one. So let's just experiment with this algorithm a little bit. We'll try singing first. So again, it's, I think, a harmonizer on acid, on steroids. It has that different quality to it that you would expect with something from Soma, just very innovative and experimental. Let's just, I'm not sure if you can do percussive ones on this, but let's experiment with that just to see how it works, because this is not one I think I would use for percussion, but let's see how that might be. So that is one, and I think that's what's cool about the pipe is you can experiment and see where these different algorithms might fit in terms of your mixes, your live performances, however you're using this instrument. In that particular case, at least on a first practice, I guess I wouldn't use it for a percussive effect. So it obviously takes some practice to learn a little bit more about how these algorithms might be used in your sonic creations. Okay, the next algorithm we'll look at is called generator, and it has that radioactive symbol. And this one is so complex I have to refer to the manual here a little bit. This is one of the most unusual algorithms of the pipe. It includes a voice-controlled sound generator, filters, ring modulator, and delay with dynamic feedback. And this one, believe me, sounds really, really harsh. If you're looking for experimental drone-y craziness, this is really your algorithm of choice. And just to review, this one is pretty easy to remember. So knob 1 is bass, knob 2 is mid frequency, knob 3 is high, and then delay feedback is triggered by your sensor, which almost you don't need on this algorithm. It's so intense. So I may have to adjust the level so I don't blow the mix here. Let's try this one out. And they recommend percussive as well as tonal, so we'll try tonal first and go into percussive next. Try the sensor. It really has a drone synthesizer sound to it. And this is another one that as I'm singing it and I have the headphones on, I can hear a little bit of the mix from this. It's just hard to make out because I'm hearing my own voice singing, and it's just one of those uncanny things about playing this instrument in this way, trying to hear the mix. Let's try percussive sounds as well. That's pretty darn cool. It has like a Buchla crazy algorithmic sound to it, and just in terms of what's spitting out there. That's a really cool one. Again, that one, unlike our Octaver one, really does allow you to go between the tonal and the percussive to decide on a sound that fits your mix. Our last algorithm today is called harcho, if I'm saying that right, and it refers to a Georgian stew of all things. And this is another one that's very extreme. We're already hearing sounds here without even doing anything. So let's look at what we're controlling. This has a lot of distortion to it. Knob 1 is distortion mix, knob 2 distortion low pass filter, knob 3 reverb time. And then the sensor, I love this, the function is extreme, and it's already pretty extreme. So let's try some different things with the harcho algorithm. who needs a whammy bar, right? I mean, it has that kind of effect there. That's a very cool algorithm. I was trying to sing just some intervals there so you get a sense of what this device can do. Maybe we'll try this one last time with percussion on that same Harcho algorithm. All right, so there you go. Those are the algorithms of the pipe. If you don't find those amazing, then again, this instrument may not be your instrument, because I think this thing is just so revolutionary and experimental and avant-garde the more and more I have a chance to play with it. All right, I actually thought it would be useful for us to take a look at the pipe as an effects unit, since that is one of the potential uses. So I thought we would do this in two phases. We'll actually go through every algorithm. First, let's use a percussive sound to give you a sense of how percussive patches will sound in here. And then second, we'll use a more sonic drone that has a more legato sustained sound to it that gives us a sense of how you might use it to create soundscapes. So first off, let's hear the dry signal coming out of our 406 Olectron, and we'll then patch it in here and go through the different algorithms. So here's the dry sound. All right, and next we'll take our pipe, and again, all you're going to do here simply is remove the mouthpiece microphone and put in any 1/4-inch cable. All right, for each of these I'll start with the algorithm. I won't call these out, and I'll do some parameter changing on here, do the secondary sensor, and you'll just get a general sense of what this will sound like. So we're starting with Orpheus, and we'll move all the way around, and I think it'll be obvious which algorithms we're on. Okay, so you got a sense here, using the Oligtron, of some of the potential of using your pipe as an effects unit. I think for me, maybe one of the best ones was the first algorithm, Orpheus, and then the filter one was pretty cool as well. There were some interesting things. I think it was with the pulse one and the mad delay that had some interesting, like, arpeggiated things going on. Using percussion, something like this, which is already percussive, a sequence, in with the, say, 3 drum algorithms, I mean, I don't know how useful that is. And that's one of those things that you have to really experiment, like with your voice and the different algorithms. As you try out different sound sources using the pipe as a dedicated effects unit, you really have to see what works, and you have to custom tune, obviously. First decide on the algorithm, and then you can fine tune the 3 controls as well as use the secondary sensor. So next, let's try a more ambient drone sound and see how that is responsive in terms of using the pipe as an effects unit. Okay, for the next experiment, we're going to use the Mofenzief MSG drone, going directly in to just test ambient sounds with the pipe as an external sound processing device. By the way, this is useful to know if you use a mono 1/4-inch cable. It will automatically ground the unit, and you don't have to press the activation, that bottom button, to get the unit going. If you used a stereo cable, then actually you would have to press that button. So I have a mono cable going in here right now, and thus we hear the constant sound. So just for the sake of the demo here, I will keep the unit flat like this, and I think you'll just see as I switch each algorithm, you'll know I'm going to the next one. So we'll go clockwise, starting with Orpheus, moving to Filtera, going all the way around to the pulse ones, the drum ones, and then ending with our experimental ones. And I should say, as I'm doing this, I will not adjust any of the parameters on the MSG, just so we have a constant. You hear what that sounds like. We'll only do the effects on the pipe itself. And right now, just to mention this in case you're wondering, that's actually the first bass drum patch. So we're getting a totally different effect because this is coming in as such a sustained drone. And it actually does create, I think, a cool opportunity for different use of this unit than you would normally use it for, say, as a wind instrument with a microphone. So kind of cool to note that right now. All right, so that was actually pretty telling. I don't know what you thought of the sound demo, but you heard some really fascinating sounds there, just some of the timbres coming through, some of the added harmonics. Again, I think Orpheus is just always an interesting standby algorithm. I found that Pulse was really cool because keep in mind we took a drone, a constant drone, that has, obviously there's some oscillation, and with this particular pattern of the ETC you can't tell as well as my typical oscillator, but I wanted to do something a little different. But so it's a constant drone, and the Pulse added just a really nice arpeggiated sound to it. And then probably most surprising to me, I don't know if it was to you, was the 3 bass drums. They had very similar sound to them, but they really changed the character of the sound, and they obviously didn't do anything percussive in terms of adding arpeggiation or anything like that. And then the last 2, the Generator and the Heart Show, those were really, I thought, quite nice, adding just harsh, distinctive timbres. And you noted maybe in some of the cases there was quite an effect when we added the secondary sensor button. So I think all in all, I mean, with these 2 tests, I think we've proven that you could simply buy a pipe and use it as an external effects generator. I haven't done anything with my modular unit, but keep in mind one option that you could always do, and you could do this also if you had a Soma field kit, anything with an envelope generator, you can use a splitter, and that's actually what I did with my ETC going here. Use one of these splitters or multiples, and you can take a second signal from anything, in this case the pipe, affected, and send that out to an envelope follower and have that further trigger a Eurorack module. So you could really see the pipe being a mainstay in your Eurorack and modular setup just as an effects unit without ever using the microphone itself. All right, I hope you enjoyed this overview today of the fascinating Soma pipe. If you get a chance to play one of these or to purchase one of these, I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's not an instrument for everybody. It's highly experimental in design. There's something organic about this instrument because you're using your voice to trigger it. And there's also something highly mysterious about it as you begin to explore some of the possibilities. So I wish you good luck if you have the opportunity to work with a Soma pipe in the future. And as usual, come back to my videos and we'll focus on more experimental sound design, Eurorack and modular synthesis, and a slew of other issues out there in terms of the possibilities of sound and experimental music in the contemporary world.
One, one.